Hello, I'm Lucy. I'm the Research Fellow for the ASOS 2 trial, and I've spent the last 4 weeks visiting all the hospital sites in KZN with Mamisa, and we're just going to do a short video on a few tips of how to ensure the trial runs smoothly and how to communicate well within the team.
Hello, I'm Mamisa. I work with King Edward's Hospital, and we've been traveling to different hospitals with Lucy, and I'm going to be asking you, Lucy, a list of questions on how to prepare for the clinical trial. So how do you think you should prepare the team for the start of the clinical trial?
So I think once you have a team together, communication is going to be key. So making sure you're communicating with your core team that are going to be involved in the ASOS trial. This can be done sort of verbally, so having short, quick meetings with people. It can also be done in a written way, so having WhatsApp groups, email groups, just keeping everyone in the loop all the time so everyone's aware of what's going on. I think planning is going to be really important. Plan how you think the trial is going to run, plan how you think the CRFs are going to be used, and then communicate this within the team. Also thinking of potential challenges that might arise and try and think of how you might resolve those challenges before you actually start the trial. I think what's also important is making sure that each member of that core team has a specific role and they're aware of what that role is. And then also just spreading awareness. So you've got your core team of investigators and people who are involved, but then lots of people in the hospital are going to be affected by the trial. So making sure that awareness is spread throughout the hospital and that everybody that comes across the CRF knows what it's for and knows what the trial is about.
Okay, so my next question would be, how do you ensure that staff members are aware of the clinical trial?
So I think this is really important. I think communicating with everyone that's going to be affected by the trial in terms of staff members is aware of the trial. So this is difficult in big hospitals when you've got lots of staff and lots of nurses who are changing shifts. Ways that you can do this and ways that some hospitals have been running it is having sort of bite-sized teaching sessions. So short teaching sessions on the wards with the staff, 5-10 minutes. This is what the trial is about, this is how it's going to affect you, and then repeating these sessions as much as you can to capture a large audience.
Yes.
I think a good time to do this is at handover, so find out when the nurses have their handovers, when the doctors have their handovers or morning meetings, and capturing those people then. Having informal chats with people, saying, have you heard about the trial? This is what it's about. Just keep communicating with everybody. Another way would be to have a little poster that you put up in staff rooms, tea rooms, nurses' stations, anywhere where staff will be able to see it, just so that awareness is spread. Another thing is to have a key person on each ward. This could be a nurse or it could be one of your interns, someone who's allocated to that ward, who knows about the trial and is in charge of communicating to the people on that ward what the trial is about, when it's starting, how they're going to be involved. But making sure you're communicating constantly, you don't just communicate at the start, it carries on throughout the trial. I think that's really important.
Okay, so how do you deal with staff members who are reluctant in participating with the clinical trial? Because with some hospitals that we've visited, we found some of those nurses, for example, who thought this is added work for them. So how do you deal with those? How do you motivate them?
So I think motivation is really important, and what can help motivation is knowledge. So again, it's going back to communication. It's going to be educating and communicating with those staff members, and once they know more about the trial, I think they'll be less reluctant to be involved. I think if they hear there's a trial and they've got to do extra paperwork, then that's going to come across negatively. But once you explain what the trial is for, how it's going to run, and actually that it shouldn't be increased workload, it's just working in a slightly different way, I think that's really important. Explaining the importance of the trial and how this can potentially benefit their patient group is really important. Getting that excitement and that passion about the trial is going to be really important. I think listening to their concerns, so they may have concerns about not being able to implement some of the interventions, so listen to those concerns and work out how you may be able to sort of resolve those issues. For example, in some hospitals we've looked at the interventions and discussed with the nurses which ones do you think you can do, which ones do you think you can't do, and then coming up with a plan. So involving them with it, and then also, informing them, communicating with them. I think that's really important. Okay,
so now you've gathered your team, you have prepared your team, everyone is ready and everyone is excited about the clinical trial. How do you then ensure that the clinical trial runs smoothly?
I think This varies from hospital to hospital. Every hospital that we visited is doing it in a slightly different way, so it's working out what's going to work best for your hospital and your team. I think having a pathway for the CRF, working out where it's going to go. For example, in some hospitals, they live in theatre, the anaesthetists fill out the risk calculator, then it gets stapled to the form, then it goes down to the surgical ward, then the nurses take over and fill out the interventions, then the surgeons fill out the discharge section, and then somebody's allocated to collecting them at the end of each day. That's just one example of how it's working in some wards. But if you can envision where the CRF is going to go, then you're not going to hopefully lose as many CRFs, because that is one of the challenges. I think having defined roles again, so people know what they're responsible for, that's going to be really important. And again, communicating, so checking up with the team daily, are there any issues, making sure there's that conversation about how it's going, and that you're trying to fix issues as you go, because things will arise, there will be complications, things won't run as smoothly. So it's about communicating with your team and listening to what they're saying, and thinking of how you can make it better.
Yes. Okay. My last question would be, how do you keep track of the CRFs now that you have them in the wards? How do you then locate them?
So again, hospitals are doing this differently. I think a few sort of practical tips are highlighting the CRF with a sticker, so a bright pink sticker, so that in a bunch of paper you can see it easily.
It is.
Another thing is people are stapling it to the front of files, making sure that it doesn't just get swept away and lost in all the other paperwork that there is. Having a dedicated box on the nurses' station where when they're discharged the nurses know to put them in a box, or having a file on the wards that means everyone knows where the CRFs are. Again, it's communication. Have a discussion with your team, see how they think it's going to work, and make a plan for what's going to work in your hospital.
Thank you, Lucy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.